Hi, good morning, all of you. How was your the details of all the supporting resources for going through the course is already given. So it will help all of you in terms of referring the content materials besides or in addition to whatever is there in the textbook. So what I have given across, for example, we were dealing with one case which I think three groups have presented, and that was on the Ohio lottery case, and which, as I was telling all of you, that we will keep coming back to that because at the end of the day, that case is a very exhaustive case. The Ohio lottery case is a very exhaustive case, and it has detailed description of how a particular research has been conducted, and the entire research design using qualitative and quantitative methods have been detailed in the case study. So if all of you remember the Ohio lottery case, the case study on which was based several questions, and many of you have presented and all of you have also submitted the PPTs and the written answers. So if you have a look at the Ohio Lottery Innovative Research Design case, which is very exhaustive, you will see that we will be able to look at various kinds of, I'm just enhancing the resolution. You will be able to understand that, as was asked in the case study, various kind of qualitative methods of collecting the data was discussed, primarily the metaphor elicitation technique. And I have provided some videos on and extra materials on how this particular technique as a qualitative research technique works, and you can find it on the LMS, right? So it gives you an idea about how when you conduct a research study, it is not only just about taking questionnaires and putting forth questions and asking people to answer, but it is a comprehensive method, and that is what this exhaustive case study deals with. And it is just not pertaining to the first few chapters of the book or the unit of your syllabus, which pertains to how to understand what is a business research and how to go about it, what are the research questions, what are the research the problems that have to be pursued as part of business research. But it also details exhaustively the heart of any research, which is primarily the research design, and which also determines the kind of data that has to be collected and the techniques in the collection method. And that is what you see, which is there in the second phase of the study in the case, which is the quantitative survey. And what you see in the case, particularly in the Ohio lottery case, exhaustive case, is that when you are doing a quantitative survey, especially this particular case has used a survey method of collecting data, there is an exhaustive set of questions which are used in the survey questionnaire, the instrument for collecting the data. And what we are primarily dealing with, and then to align it with respect to the syllabus that you are having, unit 1, 2, and 3 is what we have completed. Primarily, unit 1 dealing with the first preliminaries of research. Second part of the unit or second unit of your syllabus, and the third unit primarily deals with the different kinds of research as well as the sampling methods and all of that. So what you see here in the case study, and when you align that with what you're studying right now, and we have already begun unit 4, all right, so which is primarily about measurement techniques and all of that. You will see that in this instrument that has been used by this by the case study, there is an exhaustive list of questions with different kinds of scales which are used to collect the data. And that is why the data analysis that follows or that has been outlined there is in line with the type of data that is collected. And finally, as the case delineates, it says that depending on the type of research problem, the particular set of qualitative and quantitative research design has been executed to collect the data, and the data analysis of the set of variables that are collected from the respondents through different types of questions, scales, and all that has been analyzed. And then the final part of the research is the conclusion aspect of it is about the reporting of the outcome of the study, right? So in effect, this particular case study highlights to all of you, and when you have done this kind of a discussion, we have all seen that it primarily deals with a particular objective, that is to understand what can make the players of lottery to buy more, and how to also encourage or motivate and find the perception of the non-players, right? So with effect to the objective that has been the primary concern for the case study, there were certain questions that were asked for students to discuss and kind of put forward. So the first set of questions, which I think when we took the three groups to discuss, we found that accepting Omkar's group, I think who had primarily talked about the, but, or is it Omkar's group, or I think Anusha was mentioning, the first question that was discussed, the overall research design is about the mixed methods or the combination of qualitative and quantitative. So if you look back in your PPTs, many of you have outlined very many things, general stuff. And when we did the previous, when we were in the previous session, I had also asked many of you that the first question that most of you have answered was not very exhaustive, because the primary answer is that the overall research design is a combination of both qualitative and quantitative methods. Just as if you see the body of the question of the case study, you will see that the metaphor elicitation technique is a qualitative method of collecting data. And when you come to the second part of the case study, it deals with the quantitative aspect, the various kind of questions that are asked in with different kind of scales. So we will be discussing as part of unit 4, and now going forward, we will be discussing the theoretical aspect of the different kind of scales, and then you will see how it is practically applied, how you can also make different kinds of questions using these different kinds of measurement scales. Reference point will be the case that you have already been dealing with, which is this particular case. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the design that has been used in the Ohio lottery case? Like what many of you have identified also, yes, it is primarily that qualitative method is an exploratory method. Like we saw that research design are two kinds. One is exploratory, and then the other kind would be conclusive. Conclusive will have, you will have the descriptive type, you will also have the kind of experimental, the causal type of research design. So the point is that you blend both methods, qualitative and quantitative, in order to arrive at a certain kind of an idea, in order to deal with the solving of the problem of the research. One method particularly will not be useful. Any one method used in isolation will not necessarily be helpful. For example, if you had only used the metaphor elicitation technique in the Ohio lottery, that would not have comprehensively provided an idea about the objectives of their case. What was the primary objective of the case? To find out certain things about players and non-players. So only using the qualitative method would not have served the purpose. At the same time, only using a quantitative method also would not have served the purpose. So blending both methods, taking the inputs from both the exploratory method, the qualitative method, and then taking it as an input into the quantitative method, provides a very robust way of finding out or going forward to find out the solution to the research problem. If you consider the second question in the case, the evaluation of the MET process, so one has to understand what is this process. It's a very classic process, very old process, that is by the extra materials which I have given out, and it is part of a qualitative method of study. It has to be conducted with experts, and the researcher, if the researcher or the group of researchers who are going to engage this method, if they are not familiar with it, they need to engage a person or a professional, and that's what we see in the case study, that the organization actually takes the help of an expert organization to ensure that they are able to conduct this particular method. Now, the strengths and weaknesses of this method is that, of course, if the researcher or the sponsor organization does not have the capacity to conduct it, one needs to avail the services of an expert who is proficient in this field and take their help to ensure that this method can be used. So it doesn't mean that the researcher, what do you see from this aspect of the case study? That one does not need to be a specialist in that field or a method in order to use that method in the study. You can always call for the help. That is what we have seen as part of the kind of problem definition, right? That the discussion with experts, the discussion with industry people, the discussion with the organizers, the discussion with different kinds of domain experts help the researcher understand what is required actually for conducting the research. So that is what the MET process requirement was there for this research, and how it was conducted also throws light on the practical application of how this is actually done, and what happens if a process like this, a qualitative process like this has to be employed, but the organization does not have the kind of specialization in that. What do? They reach out and get the help from a specialist organization who can help them in conducting that. Now, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses? Of course, you can see that there are the strengths would be that you are able to explore in a very, very open-ended manner different kinds of opinions of people and all, asking them to get some photographs and all that. So you really explore many things without really constraining respondents to a set of questions, or not having any bias as a researcher. That is, these are the questions I'm going to ask, and this is how I expect the answers to be. So you're not really force feeding people to behave in a certain way, or neither are you going with a certain bias. You're really open to the idea. Then that's what is one of the critical aspect of research, which is that we don't really need to have a bias. We don't need to assume that we know. If we knew the answer to our questions of interest, then I think there would be no need of research. And it is not only my thought, it is a general professional assumption that there must not be a predefined or an a priori understanding of the kind of answers that are going to be the outcome of the research. If there is in a priori situation, that is before even conducting the research, if you're really in a position to understand the answers, then there is no need for investment of resources and doing research in the first place. Then might as well not do the research, but go with the assumption. If the research has to be conducted primarily because whatever is the data or whatever is the kind of input that is required is not available or has to be validated, is not really sure whether that is the fact, that is when the phenomenon or a certain phenomenon has to be studied with all possible ways of exploring the area of concern and coming out with the outcome. The outcome has to be out of a research has to be such that it is robust and it should be reliable and valid. And that is why the process of research is considered in a manner that it should be very systematically and objectively done. And that is what you see in this case study also, right? So it is systematically done. There are certain objectives that are followed. It is done in a very scientific manner, blending both the qualitative and quantitative methods. Now, why do we do that? Because you're dealing with human subjects, you're dealing with a social science subject. You want to find out about the attitudes, the perception of people, in this case study about players and non-players. So it is not something that you can subject it just in the manner of a questionnaire or just subjecting people to say yes and no. So you want to have blended method of finding the data. So that is why these are some of the strengths of using the qualitative technique, especially of the MET. But what are some of the weaknesses? The weaknesses could be very many. Some of the weaknesses which all of you also have identified as part of your answers would be that it is very detailed, sometimes very confusing. It tends to be very, very detailed. You don't really know what to really keep and what to really filter out. But the entire process of understanding that set of data collection is so humongous that perhaps you cannot really deal with many subjects. You cannot deal with many respondents. So the quantum of data that can be collected from people could be limited, right? In the sense that you cannot have many people being talked to thousands and thousands of people, whereas that can be possible in a survey and all of that, because these kind of elicitation techniques, the qualitative method that has been used in the case study is primarily a face-to-face or a kind of an interaction between the researcher and the subject, the respondent. So primarily it being very, very time consuming, it has to be very much detailed, the use of expertise, all of these can prove to be some of the disadvantages. However, you need to balance the disadvantage with the advantage, which is take that input and then blend it to kind of find out what kind of more information is required. And similar case to this also, let me remind all of you, is the collection of people. The people or the set of people that are to be used in such qualitative studies must also be representative. The sample, though small than any kind of quantitative survey, the sample used here must also be representative of the population, the kind of demographics, the kind of income criteria and all of that. So you could mirror the kind of population characteristic even in this sample, so that you understand that the inputs that you got out of the qualitative survey is something that is also representative of the kind of people that are there in the population of interest of the study. The third question is the measurement scales. So we have seen in this particular research case study that there are various kinds of research scales that have been used, right? And that is, we have primarily understood that there are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio scale. And what you see in the some of the sample questions that are given out in the case study, that there are many interval scale questions that are used primarily because the objective of the study was to find out about attitudes and perception of people, in this case about the players, non-players, and all of that. So there are certain psychological constructs that have to be studied. So the importance of win, the importance of a game in general. So what you see here is an importance scale. So the kind of measurement scales that are used are primarily interval scale, and a lot of these questions are very intensively drawn from different kinds of interest areas of the research. So there were importance ratings. So here you see there is a 7 scale rating. Now some of you were mentioning in the answer, I was noticing when you were presenting, that 7 scale was not really good and was a good idea. Why not use a 5-point scale? Let me also reiterate here that you use normally a 7-point scale in order to increase the reliability. So though normally, for example, Likert scales and all of that you see as 5-point scales, 7-point scales, because the number of scale items are more, it tends to make sure that the people are able to give a very finer view. So it supposedly increases the reliability. However, as some of you have also correctly identified, too many scale intervals also could pose to be a kind of confusion, because people may not understand what is the difference between a 7 and a 6 or a 1 and a 2 on either side of the scale. So that could prove to be kind of confusing, yes. But the primary thing that has been used here is from the practicality aspect in order to increase the reliability. All right. So there are important scales that has used. Important scales meaning scales which measure importance of certain items that are the that have been used. Yes. One aspect of comment on the kind of the questions here is what many of you have identified, even in your answers also I was seeing that the items are very many. So multiple items on multiple parameters seem to be very confusing, but there is a reason why they have done it. And you can subject such data to further analysis like factor analysis, cluster analysis. All right. And the more number of items that you have, of course, relevant items will also enable you to get a high reliability score. The Cronbach alpha can also be higher. And the more, of course, the other aspect is that you cannot just unnecessarily load number of items in a scale to get a high reliability score, which is a Cronbach alpha of more than 0.7 is normally considered to be a very reliable scale. So the more number of interval items you add on, it tends to increase the reliability score. However, when one needs to ask whether you're unnecessarily loading items, and you need to see that within certain criteria, there should be, the items score should be within similar items. For example, reason not to play. So reason not to play, if you see on the screen, is a combination of confusion or intimidation, false hope, low interest, control, odds, myth, image, and stigma. So what happens is there's so many items under reasons not to play. These are the sub items which make up the particular aspect attribute of finding out what are the reasons not to play. And this primarily is a Likert scale, scale, 5-point scale, normally Likert scale, that from disagree strongly to strongly agree. But here you see, because of the fact of wanting more reliability, a 7-point scale has been used. All right. And what I'm trying to say is here, for example, you could combine all of these sub items under reasons not to play to find the reliability score. So you should not club the reasons not to play items with the importance items. Then of course the number of items will exceed or will become more, and definitely the reliability score, because the statistical part of the calculation, the number of items will definitely add on to the reliability, but then it doesn't make sense. So the validity aspect will not remain. So one has to do a reliability score for the importance item. You could do the reliability score separately for the reasons not to play, and of course you could do it separately for the other attributes as well. So the kind of measurement items used in this particular questionnaire for this particular case is a mix of the Likert scale items, the importance scale items, all right, and they have primarily been used because they would like to find out, the sponsors of the research wanted to find out specific things about people's perception and attitude towards certain things. For example, in this screen, if you look at the general lottery attitude, what do people generally have an attitude towards? Okay, financial aspects. So there are certain items, there are certain scale items that are there. Items meaning, for example, the first one, if I had more money to spend. All right, so what do we see here? If I put a kind of a spotlight here, or if I can just tick this, if you see on the screen, the blue tick here, the first item in that scale is about the fact that of measuring the attitude towards the general lottery on the from the financial aspect. So if I had more lottery to spend, I would play the lottery more. Second item is, if I consider the lottery a type of investment. Third item is, I play the lottery when I have extra money. So there are three items here which actually are measuring the financial aspect about the lottery attitudes of the respondent. If you see the second item here, this is the red spotlight which I'm putting here, impulse versus plan. Right? What is impulse? That is, there's no prior planning to do something, versus planned, meaning there is a prior planning and some kind of budgeting happening. So with respect to that, for example, what are the items that have been used in this particular scale? Items for impulse versus plan. When I play the lottery, I usually go to where I buy my tickets, with buying lottery tickets as the main reason for going. Now they're asking people whether you agree or disagree with this. Second item, when I play the lottery, it's usually because I happen to be there with an extra buck or two. Third item, fourth item, fifth item. Last item, when I play the lottery, it's a planned purchase. So they really want to find out whether people are really buying, or which of the respondents are really thinking or have thought of it as an impulse or a planned purchase. Now this, for example, the impulse versus planned item and the financial item, these are sub items under the items, that is the attribute concern for general lottery attitude. I've just highlighted that. I have kind of taken a so what should I say? I have just highlighted it with blue. So under general lottery attitude, there are sub items or sub item scales: financial, impulse versus plan. Next is control, skill versus luck, image and stigma. So many of these items make up or would contribute or would help in understanding about the people's general lottery attitude. And what type of measurement scales have been used? These are all interval scale items, right? So let's go back then to the understanding of what we were wanting to discuss once again. So what was the question? First, the question that we were discussing is the third one, measurement scales used in the sample questions. All right, and why they would prove to be of challenge to the professional researchers because of the intricacies, because most of the questions are pretty much looking similar, and so many questions being administered at a time, would that be really causing a kind of fatigue to the respondents? All of these, while these are very good questions in terms of the theoretical aspect or in terms of administering it on reliability aspect, all of that is there, but then it could prove to be a kind of a reliability. It could be a kind of a problem for people to respond at a time because of the multiplicity of the questions, the kind of understanding level we are not sure about the respondents, and the fact that there are so many scale items 1 to 7, which could prove, while it could provide reliability, it could prove to be a lot of challenge for people who are actually going to perhaps get confused in terms of the nearness of the ratings. For example, we said a 1 and a 2 or a 6 or a 7. So they will not typically understand unless and until it is something which is a neutral. But then one doesn't do a research primarily to find people's opinions as being only neutral. Coming to the fourth question. Fourth question was answered very well by Omkar's team, and I had requested all of you to have a look at Omkar's team's presentation. This was primarily a cross tabulation of the kind of periodicity of the the study, the periodicity of the purchase of the products, and how you can get different kinds of respondent questions. The fifth question was primarily to do with the several questions. The survey contains several questions that would alert the researchers that the participant was not taking the research process seriously. So they had included a wrong kind of a ticket item and see whether people are responding just like that, or do they know it, or are they answering in a serious way. And is that a good idea? Yes, it is primarily a good idea. Normally we also conduct that in we also do that in questionnaire design, that whenever, even if you have interval scale questions, you may not give all the kind of questions so that people answer 1 1 1 1 1 just to finish a questionnaire, or 2 2 2. So the moment you see such kind of things, you might even reverse a certain item of the scale, so that to see whether people are really reading the kind of lines and then only answering the question. So there are various methods, we will discuss that. And the last but not the least is again evaluating the MED discussion guide, which is primarily, once you understand that, this basically a process of explaining how the entire process was conducted. So if you really look at this, one has to really look at the entire case study, and we will keep coming back to this particular case study only because it has exhaustive details about different measurement scales, which is of interest to us in the particular point of the discussion in the class. So primarily we are in unit 4. If there is any question pertaining to the case, anybody can put it in the chat box. If you have any doubts, you can unmute and you can ask, or you can put it in the chat box. And assuming that there is no, kind of doubts, we will proceed with the measurement scale topic, which is unit 4 of the syllabus. And for that, I have given a separate case, which is that Crocin, a study of the Crocin advertisements and all that. Crocin case study question was given out. All of you, do you all have that? Do you remember? I had given out a Crocin case study, which was primarily a case study from Rajendra Nargunkar. And the case study was primarily meant for what purpose? The case study was meant to understand how would you really kind of do a question or develop questions based on the purpose of the research. All right, so let me just open that particular case study and let us see if we can recall, because I do understand it is quite some time since the last class, because in between you also had exams as well, right? So I am putting across to you, all of you, if you can see this. The Crocin case study is coming up. Please check if you can see this. Are you able to see this?
No, ma'am.
Not yet, not yet. Yeah, one. And just give me a moment. So if you remember, all of you, the case study which we were discussing in the last class and which I have given out was primarily to do with a case study drawn from your reference book, Rajendra Nargunkar, which was to study about Crocin's, a study on Crocin, the medicine. The objectives of the study were 3, if you all recall from the last class, and to find out the impact of Crocin commercials. Another focus of the study was to find out if commercials, that is advertisements of Crocin, had in any way affected the consumer or the doctor or the chemist. All right, and to study if the commercial for Crocin also had encouraged people to do self-medication. So there were 3 objectives of the case. And with respect to that, we were trying to find out how do you think such a case study could be conducted? That is one. The other thing is how this was particularly conducted. It was done with 3 sets of questionnaires, one for the consumer, one for the doctors, one for the chemists. One set of questionnaire for the consumers, one set of questionnaire for the chemists, and one set of questionnaires for the doctors. And we said, or I was trying to instill with all of you, the fact that when you develop questions, one has to understand how to develop questions for a data collection instrument. So if you have questions like you have seen in Ohio case study, the MET, the metaphor elicitation technique questionnaire guide, that was primarily open-ended, and you just tend to ask people broad questions and then you go deep down. It's a funneling technique. The other type of questions which you have seen in Ohio lottery case study is primarily interval scale questions. What you see in the Crossing case study are questionnaires, three sets of questionnaires: consumers, doctors, and chemists. Primarily all closed-ended questionnaire with fixed set of options. And each question in a questionnaire is made in such a way as to collect certain data about certain things which are important for the case, for the research problem at hand. So depending on the research problem, depending on the research objectives, the researcher decides what kind of questions to build up, right? Tomorrow in the class, I will give a short caselet and we will break out into different groups. That is tomorrow, I'm talking about students. So in tomorrow's class, we will do practically, you will all develop in groups. You will all develop small set of questions, because this is an online class. We cannot do it exhaustively. Otherwise, in an offline class, what I normally do is we have set of cases given, a short caselet, and students would develop a questionnaire, set of questionnaire as exhaustively as possible. Now, since we have a 1 hour class and it will be online, we will try to have it as short as possible, but basically so that you can go back at the end of the class having an idea about how to use the idea, the knowledge of the measurement scales, and how can you really put it into practice. So before you do that, I wanted you to go through this particular Crossing case study, which I've sent to all of you through the LMS and which we have discussed in this previous class as well. Again, I'm highlighting right now in a little bit more detail also, because we had a gap between the last class and this class because of the internal exams. So this particular case study, Crossing case study, you kindly go through it after the class also before coming to tomorrow's class, so that you have an understanding of how different kinds of questions can be built up based on the research objectives. Of course, you can use your creativity to develop more questions, right? So that this particular case study therefore highlights. So this case study is a combination of a case study problem, and I have also provided to you the solution of the case study as well. Why did I provide the solution? So that you are able to understand when a case is given or a problem is at hand. Of course, you will have your own way of developing the solution, but you can also have a look at how in one, how there was another method of developing a solution to the problem. So this case study, along with the questionnaires that you see and the analysis, is a comprehensive case study for you. So it has the problem of the case and it also gives you a solution. All right, so different kinds of questions are given here. So you see that there are different kinds of options, like a multiple choice question. There are also yes no kind of questions. There are different kinds of questions, of course, and one has to ensure that in a questionnaire there should not be any extra question. Unnecessary question should not be there just for the sake of making a question. What did you find from the Ohio lottery case? Sometimes more number of questions perhaps might be required for the purpose of the research problem, but it could pose to be a problem of causing tiredness, fatigue, boring. People get bored, so many questions to answer, so it could cause a kind of fatigue. And what is the theoretical implication, or what is the practical implication for this? You being a researcher, what do you or should you keep in mind? That if there is a fatigue thing coming up or certain kind of unwillingness of people to come up, this unwillingness of people to answer a question can lead to errors. Remember, respondent error, types of error, non-sampling errors, sampling errors, right? Under non-sampling errors, there are different kinds of errors arising out of researcher, interviewer, respondent, and of course, non-response errors. And even if people are answering also and they don't give you the correct answer, that could also add to the error, right? So all of these things which cause problems to people to answer can lead to error. So as a researcher, you should understand what are the bare minimum number of questions you should ask for answering, and what are the types of questions that you should put forward, and what are the answer formats. For example, if you see on the screen, question number 8 is an open-ended question. So in a questionnaire, typically don't give too many open-ended questions like your internal exam papers and all. Right now that you've answered, it's an open-ended question, so many people can give whatever answer they feel. But the moment you have quiz, you will have multiple choice. So what happens? People have to answer one particular answer. In your, if it is a subject specific quiz and all that, of course you have a specific answer to be given. Only one answer is correct. But in a respondent, for a respondent to answer in a questionnaire, Even if you give 4 or 5 options, it doesn't mean that one particular answer only is correct. You are asking about their opinion. So people can have different opinion, and that is okay. So you need to give options. So giving options is a better way of collecting data than leaving it open-ended. Because if you leave it open-ended, like question 8 on the screen, how do you really analyze that? You cannot subject it to quantitative analysis too much. You have to go for keyword analysis. You have to understand how to, take people's responses. So you can have a blend of open-ended and closed-ended questions for a quantitative survey or a survey questionnaire, but more of closed-ended questions as much as possible. So similarly, this case study also highlights the questionnaire that has been developed for doctors, because the questions that you're going to ask doctors in this particular Crocin case study is going to be different than the question that you're going to ask consumers of Crocin. All right. Similarly, so what we observe in the case study is that there are different kinds of closed-ended questions which has been given. Of course, question number 6 of the doctor's questionnaire is an open-ended question. Question number 6, question number 5, and question number 4. So why are you giving open-ended question? Again, providing that kind of blend of answers, options to the respondent. That of course there are few questions on which you want answers from a predefined set of options, and there will be questions on which you would love to hear about people's opinions and not restrict them in any way. Then the third set of questions, the questionnaire of the Crocin case study is about questionnaire for retailer, right? So again, there are set of closed-ended question. There are a set of closed-ended question with yes, no options. There are closed set of questions with options of certain percentages, and it has been mentioned after the retailer. So how many questions have been given to the chemist, the retailer? There are 4 set of questions which are given to the retailer. So you can see that there are different number of questions for different kinds of respondents. So for the retailer, it was 4. For the doctor, it was 6. And for the consumers, how many questions were given for the consumers? 8 questions, right? So different number of questions for different target segments of the case study, and different types of questions for different target segment, different types of questions for the doctors, different types of questions for the consumer, different types of questions for the retailer. Why are there different types of questions for these 3 segments? Because the data that you want to collect from these 3 segments are going to be different, right? Now, it also, the case study also details to you the sample composition, who are the people that are going to be targeted for collecting the data. It has been told in this particular case study, doctors from Davangere 15, chemists from the 2 locations 10, and consumers 10. That is an assumption. It's just a case study that has been given for highlighting. And the case study also details what are some of the experiences and difficulties which are faced in the field, and some of the highlights of the problems or the challenges were language problem. And that is why primarily we need to have questionnaires which can be translated both in terms of main language and the local language. And the kind of sample that you're using, that can also become a problem. Here they're saying that the locality that they were visiting was mainly inhabited by doctors, and the problem was solved by considering a different area, because you should not have data being collected from a very skewed area. And what happens is, in this particular area, they face that if there are doctors, they're more aware of stuff and all that. So it becomes a little bit of problem. It is not that in every place people will be, or the locality or the inhabitants will be primarily doctors by profession. So they need to look into different areas where there can be the kind of population concentration can be normal. Limitation of the study is mentioned, and as well as a new dosage form. Then the case study also talks about the analysis. Now this analysis I'll leave out for a later discussion, primarily because the purpose of our discussion right now in the next set of few classes will be unit 4 to deal with measurements and scaling techniques, right? So one has to understand, of course, look at the case study, do go through the case study, do see the case study, and understand how from these questions the case study has also discussed about the analysis, how different kind of analysis were conducted based on the different kind of data that was collected, right? So if till now, if there is no doubt, or even if there is a doubt, please put your answers in the chat, put your questions in the chat box, or unmute yourself and ask me. So till now, whatever we have discussed about the Crocin case study, and whatever we discussed initially with the Ohio Lottery case study, we are blending both of these and going forward to understanding the theoretical aspect of the measurement and scaling techniques of our topic of discussion. So primarily when we talk about measurement and scaling techniques in research, one has to understand that these are primarily aspects about collecting data. And this particular measurement and scaling technique, you can refer from chapter 11 of the main textbook, right? Cooper and Schindler, chapter 11. And the case studies have been given for understanding. One was from the textbook and one has been from the reference textbook. One has been from the Cooper and Schindler textbook, Ohio lottery case. The second case study for the discussion of this particular topic, which is the Crocin case study, has been taken from the textbook of Rajendra Nargunkar, which is given in your syllabus, marketing research textbook of Rajendra Nargunkar. He is an IIM faculty. So that particular case study that we just were discussing a little while back has been taken from that textbook of the IIM faculty. And that would primarily help in understanding how these different kind of concepts are being have to be known, or how they should be used. So when we come in terms of understanding the measurement terms, as we have seen previously, a little bit of quick recap: concept, construct, variable, and operational definition will be discussed. And when you are measuring something, you're measuring something with respect to a subject of interest about some kind of a phenomenon, some kind of rule of mapping, and you apply each of these rules to find out some details of some object of interest, which will help you to, when analyzed, will help you to find the analysis, or the result of that would help you to understand something about the research topic. So there are certain measurement models that I was saying that we will look at. Primarily, the true measurement model is a measurement model which is a composition of whatever has been observed, and the reliability and the validity aspect of it. We will elaborate more on this a little later in a subsequent class. So different type of scales which are used for measurement are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Can students please mention in the chat box? Keep your answers coming in the chat box, please. What do you think are nominal scales, ordinal scales, interval, and ratio? Give examples and put it in the chat box, please. Please, I would like to see answers from all of you coming in the chat box about nominal scale. So what are nominal scale? Nominal scale, we said, is scale of measurement which deals with classification. You classify into different categories, right? So it could be 1 and 2, male and female, yes and no, all of that. Ordinal scale, ordinal scales are ordering. You classify first, second, third, that kind of a thing, right? You are placing certain things in order. So ordering scale. So please give me in the chat box, please mention in the chat box examples of ordering scales that you can use. What kind of questions can you build on that? So next is the type of scale is interval scale. Interval scale is what you saw in the Ohio lottery case. What did you see in the Ohio lottery case? That there were interval scales used, important scales, right? Very important, extremely important to not important, or agreement scales, Likert scales, like strongly agree to strongly disagree. So there are distances used, and of course you can have different kinds of intervals that are there. Ratio scales are different type of scales which have a particular type of quantification, and there is normally a point of starting point of origin, and you can always build ratios of that. Right. So there is an answer which is there in the chat box. All of you please see that. Siddharth has mentioned something. All right. So nominal scale is a scale of measurement used to assign objects and events into categories. So can some people give some examples? Can you give some examples of, okay, nominal scale could be name of products, okay, name of products, but then you should name it as 1, 2, 3, 4. So Anusha is saying that nominal scale could be name of products. Yes, if I ask you, what are some of the shampoo brands that you can think of? And I give an option, number 1, Sunsilk, second, Pantene, third, Dove, fourth, something else, right? Garnier. So what I'm giving, 1 for the first, 2 for the second name, third, 3 for third name, and fourth. So this could be different categories. You could ask people to respond. We will look at all of these also. Yes. What about ordinal scales? Ordinal scales, ordering. If you want to ask people, which is your first preferred online food platform that you use to order food? Which is the first, Swiggy or Zomato? Or how would you, rank Swiggy and Zomato? Swiggy is first, Zomato is second, or Zomato is first and Swiggy is second? Or for example, if you want to ask people to order something like, for example, which is your first preferred online, radio taxi? Uber or Ola? First, which is the first one that you think of? Which is the first one that you think of, thinking of something is different, that is a ready to recall, top of the mind recall, and something which can be from the heart, which is something that people like. Okay, so there can be ordinal scale based on that. Interval. What are interval scale? Interval scales are what we saw primarily in terms of the intervals, 1 to 7 interval in Ohio lottery case for importance scales, or agree to disagree scales, right? We will see some more scales also in a later class, semantic differential scale, and we will also see scales like staple scale. All right, there are 10-point scales. So we will see some of these scales which are interval scale. Ratio scale, primarily, for example, age in years. Age can start from certain hours, number of hours or days or weeks, months, to different number of years. So the lifespan of a human being could be anywhere from 0 to 100, right? The lifespan of different animals are different. You can also have ratio scales to measure distance in any of the units, right? You can have a ratio scale to determine the duration of time. So these are certain things which you can use. So some of the scales, when you have to think of using it, you need to look at some of the applications. So in this context, I will put up another file here, which is about questionnaire development. So let us see briefly how you can use these kind of questions, this kind of scales for developing questions. I hope you're able to see this. So I'm putting up for you one, what we are going to now discuss is about questionnaire and form design. So we're developing questionnaires and different kinds of forms to collect data. So the questionnaire design process. So what is a questionnaire design primarily? Questionnaire design, to design a questionnaire. Why are questionnaires required? Because you want to collect data, right? So when you want to collect data, you have to develop suitable set of questions. And for developing those questions, there is a certain set of process. So questionnaire design process follows from the top set of process. So let us see in terms of the first set of process which is required. So I will try and highlight that in terms of the red color tick. The first set of the process begins from the top, specifying the information required. Second is specify the type of interviewing method. Next is determine the content of individual questions. Next will be design the question in a questionnaire, of course. So design the question to overcome the respondent's inability and unwillingness to answer. Design the question, decide the question structure. That is why we said the question structure should be such that people are able to answer. They should be able to understand, be able to answer, be willing to answer, and be able to, give forward their answers clearly. Question structure, question wording also should be done. That is why even pre-testing of questionnaires are done, so that people really understand the kind of questions. So researcher needs to ensure that the wording of the questions should be such that it is up to the level of comprehension of the respondent. So pre-testing, the translation process, all of these have to be properly done. Next set of the process will be to arrange the questions in proper order. What did we see in the Crocin case study? That there were a certain set of questions for consumers, doctors, and chemists, and closed set of questionnaires were asked before answering the open-ended questions. So primarily asking each set of respondents to answer questions which were either very easy to answer or certain things which were like multiple choice questions to be answered first and then only open-ended question. So arrange the questions in proper order and even the number of questions also. Next would be identify the form and layout. So previously it used to be only hard copy. Nowadays, of course, you have Google surveys, you have Google forms, in which you can, of course, make the questionnaire and send it across. And sometimes these days we don't even use hard copy papers to have questionnaires taken to people. We can use phones and tabs, all of that. Or if it is in a particular place, you can use computers, all of that. So form and layout of the question is very important so that people see how the questions look like and how many questions to answer in what kind of form and layout. Otherwise, if it is going to be hard copy, you need to ensure that the questions are made or the questionnaire is made in nice paper and kind of glossy look or something, and decent enough so that people really like to take it up and answer it. Reproduce the questionnaire in suitable format, soft copy, hard copy, the type of formats required. And the last set of the design process, questionnaire design process, would be to eliminate the bugs by pre-testing. So how do you eliminate bugs by pre-testing? You need to ensure that the questionnaire is pre-tested on similar samples, and then a debriefing is done to understand what kind of problems people are facing in the pilot testing procedure. So this is the questionnaire design process. What you see on the screen, students, are the set of steps that are there to be followed when designing the questionnaire design process. So please understand this. Number one, many students make a mistake, which is whenever they have a research, first thing is they start making questions. No, you need to first understand what is the purpose of this research work. What is the research problem? Does it need to have blend of both qualitative and quantitative methods of collecting data? And then when you are using a questionnaire, then you need to understand it is not about just jumping and making the question, but follow the steps, which is the first thing should be what are the information that is required from the study. And how am I going to conduct the study? Offline, online, by telephone, over meeting people, or sending it by email. So different formats of the method employed will determine how you're going to use the questionnaire. And then you set off, kind of determine the set of questions. All right. Next. So these are some of the questions, example of some questions which I'll put on the screen, some of which is will be the incorrect form of question, and we'll see what are the correct form of question. So sometimes what happens is you need several questions. You need more than one question to ask something. For example, in this questionnaire, what you see on the screen, I'm going to highlight something. All right. See this scale, this one which I'm drawing. Do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty and refreshing soft drink? It's a question, yes, but it is not a correct question. Why? Because you're asking two criteria things about the brand Coca-Cola. Do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty and refreshing? So you can't ask both. So you need to actually make two questions such that you ask something about Coca-Cola, about its tastiness, and whether it is a refreshing soft drink. If you use two things in one question, people will be confused. So it's better to use this set of two questions which is in the bottom of your screen. What do you see on the bottom of your screen? Do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty soft drink? One question. Second question, do you think Coca-Cola is a refreshing soft drink? This is the correct one. If you put two sets of things in a question, in one single question, this is an example of a double barrel question. So people are going to be confused and they will not be able to answer something correctly. Right? So it is better to ask two questions, because in this case, in this particular case of what you are showing on the screen, there are two criteria about which the researcher wants the details. And the two criteria happens to be tastiness and the refreshing nature. So it is better to build it into two questions and not into one single question. If you try to put both the things in one question, you're going to commit an error, which is called the making a question, which is double barrel, and this will not give you the correct set of answers. So what do you need to remember? You need to ensure that you're asking 2 sets of questions or 3 sets of questions, or you should ask different questions. Each question should have only one thing about which the people are supposed to answer. So do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty soft drink? Is asking only about whether the soft drink is tasty or not. Second question, do you think Coca-Cola is a refreshing soft drink? Is going to be a question in which you're asking about the refreshing nature of the soft drink. Got it? So that is a correct way of answering the question. One second. So, then let us look at the second type of question. All right. Let us look at the second type. What is there on the screen now? You have a question here. How many gallons of soft drink did you consume during the last 4 weeks is not correct. Okay. So one is during the last 4 weeks. It is incorrect. Why? People may not be able to recall what they have consumed in the last 4 weeks. Do you remember what you have consumed last week, Monday? What was your breakfast? Can you remember? Students, can you remember? What did you have for breakfast last Monday? Can you remember? Yeah, no, ma'am's answer is coming in. No, you cannot remember. So it's very difficult when you ask such kind of confusing questions, difficult to recall, unable to remember, right? So what is the correct way of answering this or making the question? This is the correct way of asking the question. What is the correct way? How often do you consume soft drinks in a typical week? Question. And then give some options. For example, here there are 4 options. Less than once a week, 1 to 3 times per week, 4 to 6, 7 or more times. Now ensure that each of the categories, what type of scale is this, by the way? What type of scale has been used? Categorization, 1, 2, 3, 4. What type of scale?
Nominal one.
Nominal scale, very good. And ensure that each of the categories, they should not get, mixed with the second category. So first category, less than once a week. Then 1 to 3 times per week is the second option. See, there should not be any kind of overlap between second and third option. Like 1 to 3 times a week, next should be 4 to 6. It cannot be 1 to 3 times a week and the next will be 3 to 4, 3 to 6. Why? Then people who are consuming it 3 times a week, should they answer the second category or the fourth category? That is why you should ensure that the categories are mutually exclusive, no overlap. But the total set of categories should be exhaustive of the possible answers that people can give. All right. So this is one way of looking at the question. So what are the 2 ways that we have looked at till now? We saw that you should not have double barrel questions. That is, don't include 2, 3 more options in one particular question. And the other thing is ensure that you're able to make people give options in specific manner so that they are not confused. You don't ask generally. Unstructured question. What is unstructured question? These are generally open-ended questions, right? Open-ended question that the respondent will answer. What is open-ended question? Where you ask a question and there is no preset options for people to answer. For example, do you intend to buy a new car within the next 6 months? Question, and answer option is left for people to answer. Structured question. What is a structured question? Where you are giving people to answer with an option. All right. So what is this that people are going to ask? People are going to answer. Structured questions, you have a set of responses like multiple choice questions, the kind of question that we are thinking. So multiple choice question, researcher will have a choice of answers and respondents are asked to select one or more. So do you intend to buy a new car within the next 6 months? What are the options? Definitely will not buy, probably will not buy, undecided, probably will buy, definitely will buy, and maybe some other options. So how many options are there here? First, second, third, fourth, fifth. 5 options are there, and possibly you can have one more, 6 options, right? If you have 5, you can have one which is the midpoint, which is the neutral kind of an answer option. So what is happening in this multiple choice question? It is a closed-ended question, and people can answer with respect to some kind of option that they feel is relevant to them. If you give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 category also, that becomes a kind of a interval scale question. It becomes a nominal scale question. Dichotomous question has only 2 response options, yes or no. But normally, as I told all of you, normally we do not want to force respondents to answer. So we give an option of don't know also. Makes it 3, but basically it is a yes, no kind of. So do you intend to buy a new car within the next 6 months? Yes, no. Scale used is nominal scale. Type of question it is dichotomous question. All right, so we will have this. I have already put this, and the next set is the interval scale question. I have already put this PPT in the LMS. Please have a look at that. And we will meet up tomorrow, same time, 9 o'clock, and we'll have a case and a short group work to be done on measurement scales and questionnaires. If there's any question, please leave it on the LMS, send it on the LMS, or tomorrow we shall meet. Thank you everyone for joining in. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.